not asking for the riches of this land, and I'm not asking for the high man to know my name, but please give me, Lord, give me a clean heart so that I may be used. Give me a clean heart and
I dreamed a dream on a cold spring night while on the east coast of the United States on April 29th, 2023. In this dream, I had arrived in a suburban neighborhood in northeast Ohio that appeared to be South Euclid. It was just at sundown, and everyone was preparing to lock their houses up for the night. As I drove down the street, there were some people pulling their cars into their garages or wiping their cars down. Some were raking leaves and sweeping off their porches, but most were getting the young ones in and began to cut on the lights on the inside of their houses, as the street lights also simultaneously had started to come on as well. As I pulled up in front of my sister Tracy and my brother-in-law Larry's house, I saw 3 mats laid out in front of the open garage in the driveway. One for my brother-in-law Sherman, one for my dad in the middle, and my brother-in-law Larry had the last one. Larry had pulled out all of his gym equipment out of the garage, and the 3 of them were working out vigorously on the mats with barbells and weights and doing calisthenics of all types. They were all dressed in white athletic apparel, completely fitted with t-shirts, gym shorts, long white sweat socks and sneakers, and also white wristbands and headbands. They had worked up a pretty good sweat when I got there. And I saw my brother-in-law Larry continue to pull even more things out of his garage so that I could train just like them. Once we came to the end of our workout, my sister Tracy had pulled up to prepare to enter the garage. So me, my dad, and my brother-in-law Sherman rolled up our mats and picked up those things that we had trained with to move them out of the way. After this, we then went into the house to sit in the living room while waiting for Larry and Tracy to come in. Tracy came in the house first with all sorts of bags from shopping and full of things to be prepared for us to eat while we were there. Then behind her, Rabbit and her family came in, as Rabbit was carrying Larry Jr. and Diamond's baby girl, Chloe. It had now been a while, and still, Larf, my brother-in-law Larry, hadn't entered into the room. Not long after this, my sister Keitha and her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grands all entered the house, while all of us just piled up around the fireplace in the living room, and we continued to wait for Larry. I wondered, where was my mother and my 2 brothers? Because they never entered the room with us, and it appeared that Tracy was in the kitchen, talking at length to my mom, as we could hear their voices carry into the living room where all of us were sitting. So many people had started to enter into the house until it was at full capacity from top to bottom, and we still waited for Larf. The hour had drawn late, and the night had grown completely dark, and every light in the house was on except in the dining room. As I suppose nothing had been prepared to eat without our family chef, Larry, being in there. Everyone was communicating, laughing, and enjoying one another's company. I looked over at the fireplace, and there was a big red and silver pillow that was laid immediately in front of it. And there I saw a pretty little girl crying with her face in that pillow. She was light-skinned with a head full of super curly and wavy black hair. She had dimples and a pointy nose, and she sweated as she was crying. It seemed that no one else in the room had noticed her or even heard her in the midst of all of the many voices and conversations that was going on in the room that night. So I walked over to her, and then I laid down on the other side of the pillow across from her. I was sad for her, and so I asked her, "Little one, what's wrong? And why are you crying?" Through her muffled cries from the pillow, she just kept asking, "Where is my pop-pop?" Then she lifted her little face up, and it appeared to be my niece, Micah, whom we all affectionately call Rabbit, because she was born on Easter Sunday morning of 1982. She is the only daughter of my sister Tracy and my late brother-in-law Larry. She appeared as the 3 or 4-year-old version of my niece, who was always so near and dear to my heart, as she lived with me and my parents during that time frame of her little life, while my sister and brother-in-law were both active in the United States Navy. I held her little hand, and I told her that Pop-Pop had been with my Pop-Pop, and that he loved her, and he would be back for her, just like my Pop-Pop came back for me. My sister Keitha heard my response and said to me, "They call Daddy, our dad, Pops, not no Pop-Pop." Then my niece Rachel's kids overheard, and they started to chime in as well. The girls all said, more loudly and in particular, Atoya, "Well, our Papa is here, and he came back for us too." As the little girl cried the more, she said, "I just want my Pop-Pop for me. Why won't he come in here?" I looked towards the kitchen where the brightest lights were shining, and out of the light, my adult niece, Micah, came into the living room and laid on the other side of that big red and silver pillow, across from me and right next to little Rabbit. Micah picked her up in her arms and gave her the biggest hug, and then she said to her, "Daddy always comes back for me. And he always came back for you too." Then Micah kissed her on the cheek and laid her back down on the pillow. Shortly thereafter, little Rabbit pointed up from the pillow, and as she pointed, the crowd began to shift as Larry finally peeked from the dining room into the living room at us. He stared for a while, as if he was taking in the brevity of the moment. Then he came a little closer and said to all of us, "Tell them about us. Make sure they know where they came from and where they are going. They need to know the path in order to find us. And if they follow us, they will find us." When I looked again across the pillow from me, the little girl that was crying was now smiling and was none other than Chloe, his sweet little granddaughter that Larf never got to meet. My adult niece Micah got up from the pillow. She smiled at little Chloe, and then she looked over at me and she winked at me. And then she walked back into those bright lights from which she had came. The room was moving in slow motion as I took mental notes to forever grasp that moment We were all excited that everyone was back together again. And afterwards, we never even knew that while the house had continued to crowd up, that Larry, Daddy, and Sherm had all long been gone. My sister Tracy finally came out of the kitchen, and she went straight to work serving us all. I remember that I desperately wanted to go into those beaming lights of that bright kitchen just to see my mama. It is where I had heard her voice in there talking to Tracy and my niece Rabbit earlier that evening. But the kitchen was now completely dark. It was silent and it was empty, as my sister Tracy was the only one who came out of it. My family and I will rejoice that night that we had my dad, Sherm, and Larry for just one more time. Even if only for that brief moment, it was clear that they simply came to make sure that we were all getting stronger. See, there is strength in numbers, and there is safety in the multitude of counselors. Those three came that we would lift each other up, work out everything together between us, lay aside every heavy weight and situation that hinders us, and to make sure that whatsoever we do, that we keep on running until the end. Larry spoke of the path that would lead us to our fathers. We must be in spiritual shape for the journey and trust that God will strengthen us in order to get there. As the scriptures declare in the book of Job, chapter 17 and verse number 9, the righteous will move onward and forward, and those with pure hearts will become stronger and stronger. I've watched from a distance, and they have all indeed become stronger, and they have become united as one. Larf was right. He said, if we show them the path, they will follow. But more importantly, Larf said, they'll find us. And it is so.